In this video, we delve into the story of Michelle Leng, a 25-year-old who realized her dream of studying in Australia in 2016. Sadly, her tale ended tragically. Michelle, also known as Mingmei Ling, was born in Shanghai, China, on January 29, 1991. She was a sensible, kind, and respectable young woman. Tragedy struck in 2008 when Michelle's father died in an earthquake. Devastated by the loss, Michelle, who was very close to her parents, was determined to pursue her education in Australia. With the excellent support of her mother, she persevered, hoping that a good education in Australia would pave the way for a brighter future. Michelle fulfilled her long-held dream of visiting Australia when she joined Sydney University of Technology in 2011. Her mother's sister kindly offered her a place in her Australian apartments. Michelle's cousin, who was 2 years younger than her, also lived with them. In 2012, Michelle's 44-year-old aunt married Derek Barrett, who was 20 years younger than her. Derek, just 3 years older than Michelle, was an unemployed professional. Together, Michelle, her aunt, cousin, and Derek lived in suburban Campsie. In the years that followed, Michelle excelled academically, made friends, and worked part-time. In April 2016, she, along with her cousin and Derek, stayed in a Campsie apartment, while her aunt worked in Wollongong. Unexpectedly, Michelle's aunt returned from her business trip 3 days early on April 24th. At midday, 25-year-old Michelle was with her friends. She took a bus from UTS to a downtown retail mall. Around 3 p.m., security cameras captured Michelle shopping on Pitt Street in Sydney CBD, appearing calm and unbothered while alone. Later, Michelle was observed taking a train from St. James Railway Station to Campsie Railway Station, arriving at 4:30 p.m. She was last seen alive at the county train station, continuing to communicate with friends and relatives on her cell phone until late. Those who spoke with Michelle that evening didn't notice any signs of nervousness or a strange voice. On Sunday, April 24th, Derek went to the train station to pick up his wife returning from her business trip. He inquired about Michelle's whereabouts, mentioning that he hadn't seen his niece in 2 days. Derek, who was unemployed and known for his tardiness, mentioned that Michelle had been frequenting nightclubs and spending time with her friends. Her cousin, too, often stayed overnight at her friends' houses, so Michelle hadn't seen her for a few days. Michelle had been missing since April 22nd, and her phone had been turned off, which was unusual because she typically spoke to her Chinese friends and family daily. Additionally, the absence of Michelle on social media was also out of the ordinary. In today's age, the sudden absence of a social media user who typically spent hours online could raise concerns. Michelle's aunt searched her room, finding it neat with all belongings in their usual places. Worried, Michelle's aunt and Derek filed a missing persons report. The next day, they informed the Chinese consulate about Michelle's disappearance. Derek shared the last time he saw Michelle, and her aunt mentioned her recent return from a business trip, unable to locate her since. Everyone who cared about Michelle was devastated when her body was discovered just before the police report was filed at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday, April 24th. Several people who called the police had spotted a body floating near Snapper Point, about 80 miles from Campsie. Australian media reported the discovery of a woman's body the same day. The report stated that a woman's body was found face down in a blowhole on the NMC's Central Coast. Police treated the death as suspicious and established a crime scene at Snapper Point in Montmartre Estate Recreation and Mooney Beach between Gosford and Newcastle. The victim was described as an unidentified Asian woman, aged between 20 and 35, approximately 170 centimeters tall. An autopsy was scheduled to determine the cause of death. The rescue chopper spokeswoman stated they didn't know how long the woman had been in the water or how she got there. Detective Chief Inspector Gary Jubilant of the New South Wales Homicide Unit stated, "We're actively investigating the area and what transpired there. We're reviewing CCTV footage and conducting surveys, gaining valuable insights into that time period, but I won't disclose our findings at this stage." Upon receiving a report of Michelle's disappearance, the police promptly cross-referenced it with the unidentified woman whose body was found at Snapper Point. The deceased woman was later identified as Michelle, bringing sorrow to her family. Inspector Jubilant stated that the police had contacted Miss Leng's family both in Australia and abroad, reaching out to Michelle's aunt who lived with her. In China, Michelle lived with a brother who might be contacted. He mentioned that delivering such devastating news is always challenging, and it's understandable that they are deeply upset. The police are urging anyone who might have witnessed Michelle's activities over the weekend to come forward, enabling them to swiftly identify the perpetrator of this heinous crime. The body recovered from the sea showed several injuries, indicating that Michelle had been brutally assaulted. During the autopsy, the examiner found over 30 stab wounds. Her arms bore signs of struggle as she fought for her life and resisted her attacker. Michelle's mother flew to Australia to visit her daughter's dream place just days after her tragic death. She is still struggling to cope with the shock of her daughter's passing, saying, "We still can't believe she's no longer with us, and the pain is unbearable," Miss Zhang said. "My husband and I will never find happiness again. You can't fathom my grief," she added. "The saddest thing in life is losing a loved one." Detectives questioned Michelle's aunt and her husband because she had been living in their apartment, and they were familiar with her. Derek last saw Michelle on the night of Thursday, April 21st. After dinner, they watched a movie, and Michelle went to bed. On Friday, April 22nd, when he woke up, Michelle was gone. He often slept in, so he assumed she had already left. He went to bed assuming Michelle was out enjoying herself with friends, thinking she hadn't returned the following day. When he woke up late and Michelle was still missing, he attempted to contact her, concerned about her well-being since he wasn't sure if she was coming back. His messages went unanswered, and while on a business trip, Michelle's aunt couldn't provide any information. However, some Australian media reports suggested that Michelle's aunt informed the detectives that she checked her niece's Facebook messages on her laptop and found recent correspondence indicating that Michelle had been dating an Australian man with blonde hair, fair skin, and intense eyes. Subsequently, the police initially suspected that Michelle had been dating someone she met online. However, this theory was quickly abandoned. Investigators do have a suspect in Michelle Leng's murder. The last person to visit her was Derek Barrett. The police had doubts about his claims of oversleeping and not seeing Michelle. They summoned him for questioning regarding his relationship with Michelle and his last interaction with her. After refusing to answer questions and requesting a lawyer, Derek was informed that he was being arrested as a suspect. Investigators examined his cell phone signal and found that he was near Michelle's body on April 24th, contradicting Barrett's claim that he hadn't visited Snapper Point that day. The police discovered video footage of a car matching Barrett's description near Snapper Point early on April 24th. The police challenged Barrett's claim that it wasn't his vehicle, even though the photo was of low quality. Detectives found high-quality video evidence of Derek Barrett purchasing gas and alcohol at a service station on his route to Snapper Point. Barrett was clearly identifiable in the footage. When confronted with this evidence, he claimed to have memory issues due to drug use. Barrett's phone was seized and handed over to experts for data analysis and recovery. The contents of the phone provided further evidence linking Derek Barrett to Michelle's death and revealed an unhealthy interest in her. Additionally, it raised concerns about his stepdaughter. A 15-minute video from September 2014 showed his stepdaughter, his wife's daughter, in the shower. Derek had concealed a camera in the shared bathroom behind toiletries. Another video showed Derek entering his stepdaughter's room while she slept, standing next to her bed, and engaging in inappropriate behavior. Derek Barrett later switched his focus from his stepdaughter to his niece on his phone. Experts were able to recover 30 minutes of footage of Michelle being filmed without her knowledge or consent. In yet another disturbing video, Derek was seen standing next to Michelle's bed while she slept. The phone also contained photos taken before Michelle's death. It was established that Michelle arrived home around 5 p.m. on April 21st, and no one has seen or heard from her since her last text message. Derek Barrett's deceitful actions began around midnight. He tied Michelle up and taped her mouth to silence her. Investigators discovered pictures of Michelle bound and unclothed on a bed, clearly terrified. The 17 photographs were taken before her fatal injuries, Derek took his last photo around 4 p.m. on April 22nd, when Michelle was still alive. Derek's stepdaughter returned home, completely unaware that her cousin was bound in the adjacent room. When questioned later, she mentioned being at home for 3 hours before leaving. Sadly, Michelle's cries for help went unanswered, and authorities couldn't pinpoint the exact time of her demise. Michelle's whereabouts during that period remained a mystery, but she was in the apartment, while his stepdaughter was home. Derek was captured on surveillance cameras leaving the apartment 4 times on April 23, disposing of garbage bags in an apparent effort to clean up after Michelle's tragic incident. Derek's wife told detectives that the apartment appeared clean when she returned from her business trip. She didn't pay much attention to it. At 3:19 a.m. on April 24th, Derek drove to a place called Snapper Point. He stopped at a gas station for refreshments and fuel along the way. At Snapper Point, he disposed of Michelle's body and took photographs. Approximately 5 hours later, around 9 a.m., authorities received a report from eyewitnesses who had spotted the body in the water. Later, Derek visited his parents, and they didn't notice anything unusual about his behavior. Derek Barrett was charged with 27 counts, including wrongful confinement, hidden videotaping, and the murder of Michelle Leng. Notably, he wasn't charged with any sexual offenses. Like many offenders, Derek mentioned a history of school bullying and personal problems. Some people believe a difficult childhood might explain his actions, but it doesn't justify his abusive behavior. The trial began in October 2017. The psychiatrist who assessed Derek found him fully responsible for his actions. Barrett had expressed remorse in a letter stating, "I lost everything because of a foolish weekend. No words can explain the pain I've caused you and the family." Addressing his wife and Michelle's family, "I can only imagine the grief my actions have caused. I deeply regret that fateful day and wish I could undo the pain. I let my troubles invade our home, and my family suffered as a result." Temme Jiang pleaded with the judge to sentence this heartless murderer to life in prison in her translated victim impact statement. She shared that the loss of her son in April 2016 devastated her family. As a single mother supporting her international student daughter in Sydney, the tragedy took a toll on them. Her mother, too, passed away from grief after her son's death. The pain left her family broken. In December 2017, Derek Barrett pleaded guilty to multiple charges. He received a 46-year prison sentence with the possibility of release after 34 years and 6 months. Barrett sat in silence during his sentencing, knowing he won't be eligible for parole until 2050 due to the severity of the crime. Detective Gary Gibbelin expressed satisfaction with the lengthy sentence, stating it reflects the seriousness of the crime. He told reporters outside the court that achieving justice is gratifying for investigators, although it's not a cause for celebration given the heartbreaking nature of the case. Michelle's family, however, wanted Barrett to serve a life sentence and were understandably upset. Sadly, the story continues as Barrett's return to court brought more pain for Michelle's family. A woman discovered a USB drive in her mother's hands, who was suffering from dementia, for years after the crime. This elderly lady had no connection to Derek Barrett and used to live 6 miles away from him before his 2016 arrest, due to her memory issues. She remains unaware of how she came to possess the USB drive. The woman's daughter decided to plug the flash drive into her computer to check its contents. Shocked by what she found, she promptly called the police. Upon reviewing the footage, investigators uncovered evidence of Derek Barrett's consistent acts driven by his perverse desires, treating Michelle as an object. The videos were recorded on April 22 and 23, 2016, depicting an abuser who derived pleasure from causing harm, humiliation, and degradation, ultimately damaging Michelle's dignity. The police informed Michelle's mother about the new videos, which deeply upset her. She fainted upon hearing the content described by the police. Barrett had placed 2 video cameras in Michelle's room to capture his actions from different angles. Supreme Court Justice Helen Wilson, who had initially sentenced Barrett to 46 years, stated that if she had known the full extent of his offenses in 2017, she would have sentenced him to life in prison. Judge Wilson described the 9 USB drive recordings as disturbing. She mentioned a 60-minute police video compilation showing Barrett entering Michelle's room. She expressed surprise and concern about his intrusion into her bedroom, emphasizing that she did not want him there. Justice Wilson observed that the recordings made by the offender suggested his intent to derive enjoyment from them later. Barrett's attempt to dispose of the USB drive indicated his desire to avoid detection. Derek Barrett faced charges of sexually assaulting Michelle Leng due to the new evidence. He pleaded guilty without making any comments. In March 2021, he received an additional 20-year prison sentence. Unfortunately, he will serve both sentences concurrently. His prison release date is now set for October 27, 2052.